Good morning, everybody. We want to welcome you today to the Lightspeed rental webinar. It's part of our Wednesday webinar series, and we're excited to have some of you back again. And if you're first time joining us, we're really excited to have you here as well. I'm Diana Wilberscheid. I work as product marketing at Lightspeed and just want to give you some basic housekeeping things today. So if we want to take a look at the next slide, I'm sure many of you have spent a lot of time in Zoom webinars, but just a reminder that you can ask us questions anytime throughout the webinar. There's a chat function or Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You can just click on that and ask questions, and we'll address those questions as we can throughout the webinar. We'll try to answer some of them at the end if we have time for those, but no fear, if we don't get to them all, we'll also follow up today's webinar with a Q&A document that you can find. You'll also get a copy of the presentation as well as a link to the recording of the webinar. So I think that's our ground rules for today. And without further ado, I want to introduce our presenter today, Brian Tierney.
Thank you, Diana. Thanks for having me, and thank you for being here, folks. My name is Brian Tierney. I'm the Customer Development Manager with Lightspeed. Been with Lightspeed in various departments for about 12 years, and prior to my time with Lightspeed, I worked in a dealership here in Salt Lake City in various departments for about 16 years, which essentially means I've been using Lightspeed for almost 30 years, which I tend to cringe when I say that because it makes me feel old. But really what got me into the industry was my love for motocross and love for the motorcycle industry itself, which I've been part of and very interested in for the last 40 plus years. So why are we here today? Well, we're here today to talk about rental. And this is a list of the things that we're going to cover in our webinar today regarding rental. What and why rental? Why would you consider rental for your business, and what is it when it comes to Lightspeed? We'll also look at the different ways that you can view the fleets that you're renting, vehicles, locations. The reservation views within the program allows us to see what those look like in real time within Lightspeed. We'll also take a little bit of an exploration of what rental items are when it comes to Lightspeed and when it comes to the rental business in and of itself, along with any charges and fees that go along with them. We'll take a little bit of an exploration of the reservation itself in Lightspeed to see what it looks like to use the rental module in real time with your customers and clients. And we'll also see how the mobile application interfaces with the rental reservation process. We'll follow all of that up with some bookkeeping and rental billing concepts and a Q&A session at the end. So when it comes to rental, why would you consider rental for your business? Is it a profitable business venture? And it absolutely is. It's profitable in the fact that it's a continual cash flow business. It also allows you to own the products and locations that are part of your rental business, which essentially is an asset that has a future resale value. Some of the things to think about when it comes to rental, some of the pitfalls that some of our customers that have thought about as they've moved into Lightspeed rental is not having a way to manage inventory, not having an automation tool to manage their rental business ultimately results in negative profitability. And that's according to rental.io. Some things to think about when we're talking about rental and the rental business. So what kind of things can you rent? Well, our Lightspeed customers that are using Lightspeed for the rental businesses are renting anything and everything from motorcycles to ATVs to mobile homes to docks to wet slips, dry docks, storage locations. All sorts of things can be rented using Lightspeed, and those are all sources of revenue for your business. One of the things that I think about when it comes to rental and the reservation business is access to what's available and seeing what's currently occupied, what I have available in quick and easy ways. A lot of times when I think about the rental business and my Lightspeed customers, I think about the person standing behind the rental desk and what their experience looks like. And a lot of the challenges that I've heard from folks that are not using Lightspeed to manage their rental business is it's difficult for them to tell what's available to rent and what's currently occupied. And some of the functions that live in the rental module within Lightspeed allow you to very quickly see what's occupied and what's available with some different interactive views. And we call those the fleet and reservation views in Lightspeed. So let's take a look at those things. And I'm going to first introduce the rental module itself. So when you log into Lightspeed and you look at the very top of the screen, when you've got the rental module in your Lightspeed system, you'll have its own series of menu items to select from. So rental becomes a selectable item at the top of your Lightspeed screen. And when you select rental, below that reveals a number of different touch points in the rental space. Your point of sale screens, settings, analytics, the rental fleets themselves are all visible within the rental drop-down modules. So some things to think about. We started talking about reservation views and to see what's available to rent in real time. Well, let's look at what that means in Lightspeed. When we're looking at reservation views, there's a couple of different ways that you can look to see what do I have available and what's currently occupied. And those two functions are what we call the graphical view and the availability view. Both of those allow you to quickly see what's available to rent and what's currently occupied. And we're going to start by talking about the availability view. Availability view is kind of like an Excel spreadsheet, if you will, that lays inside the Lightspeed world, showing on the left side panel a series of items that are rentable, whether it's a vehicle or a location. In this particular view, I'm looking at a day view, but I could also select a week, a month, or an hourly view based on the duration of rental items that I'm looking at. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But what I'm looking at is a day view of the availability of rental fleet items within my Lightspeed business. And I'm looking at two different dates, start and finish dates. And each column on my view represents a day of the week since I'm looking at the day view. And I can see on the panel or the column on the left, the different types of rental items, whether they're vehicles or locations. And I can see within the columns how many of those items are available based on the descriptions, dock slips, rental locations, campgrounds, motorhomes, ATVs. If something's currently occupied, if I open up the tree of information related to the specific rental items, if I've got a red block within that time frame, I can see that that item is currently occupied. So I can't rent that out to a customer. I can see it's currently spoken for. But anything that has a white space in the column next to the rental item, I can double click on it and I can actually create the reservation from this screen. If I click create at the bottom left portion of the screen, I can start the reservation process right from this view. But to create a little bit more of kind of like a Google Street View image, if you will, I can take a helicopter view of the locations or of the vehicles that I've got for rent or of the storage facility that I've got to rent, and I can build in an interactive experience within Lightspeed for me as a rental clerk and also for my customers. In this particular example, we're looking at a downward view of a marina and also a storage dock, dry dock location for boats. If I'm looking at this particular screen, I can see a series of rectangles that represent different status of reservation and rental items within my fleet. On the bottom left side of the screen, I've got a color legend that indicates things that are currently reserved, things that are occupied, or things that are unassigned that are potentially available to rent. So me as that rental clerk, wondering what do I have available? If I've got a customer on the phone with me or if I've got a customer in front of me, I can very quickly go to an image like this and interact with my customer to see what's available to rent in real time. In fact, I could even flip this screen around if my customer's in front of me at the rental desk and allow them to select the specific location that's best for them for their rental experience. And if once we land on that particular space, I can highlight the item on my graphical view, I can double click, and it's going to actually start the reservation process right from this view. So talk about easy. How much easier could it be? And that, I think, is really key when it comes to the rental space. Ease of use, being able to see what we have and being able to communicate to the customers in real time increases your customer experience with your clients and also the experience with the Lightspeed user. So a couple of other things to think about as we move through the rental environment are rental items, charges, and fees. What sort of things are rental items? Well, rental items are really the reason why your customer is doing business with you. It's the item that they want to rent, whether it's a location or a vehicle. Those are your rental items. In addition to the rental items, you might incur charges and fees. Well, what's a charge? If I'm renting a motorcycle, I may have to, also include a helmet. Or if we're renting a boat, we might also want to include life jackets. And so those are things that are charged to the reservation and then incur additional revenue through the reservation process. We might also have fees like a security deposit that needs to be paid up front at the beginning of the reservation. Or there might be fuel surcharges or cleanup fees or a delivery charge as we're going through the reservation process. All of those things build into the bottom line of the reservation, and ultimately the customer pays for that during the duration of the reservation. Some other things to think about when it comes to rental items is the duration of those rental terms. When we're talking about vehicles, most often vehicles are rented by the hour or by the day. Locations oftentimes are rented over longer periods of time. It might be weeks, months, seasonal reservations, or even annual reservations, in which case those reservations can be extended over a long period of time. So there's some things to think about when it comes to the different types of rental items. How are we going to charge for them? How are we going to bill for them? And what is the rental rate that we're going to apply to each of those items? And each item can have its own rate and its own terms that define the reservation as you go through the process. Let's take a look at Lightspeed again, and we'll talk about rental items themselves. So when I click on the rental items tab, which I find under rental, and I'll go down to rental items. Rental items is a list of the different things that you've got to rent from an inventory management standpoint. And while we might be talking about locations, whether it's a slip or a storage shelf somewhere in a warehouse, or we're talking about a motorhome or an ATV, they all fit into the rental item space. They all have attributes that make them rental items and rentable features. One of the neat things that I think works really well when it comes to the reservation process, if we're talking about fleet vehicles, boats, motorhomes, ATVs, those kinds of things, is we can attach units from our sales inventory to our rental inventory. And just to kind of give you a sense of what that looks like, if I double click on any one of the rental items from my list, it takes me into the detail screen of the rental item, which allows me to see the different attributes, length, width, dimensions, attributes of that particular rental item. But I can also see, in the case of this unit, it's a ski boat, and it's attached to a stock numbered unit that lives in my sales inventory. So what I've done is I've taken a unit that lives in my sales inventory and I've marked it as a rental item, moving it over to my rental fleet, and I can rent that vehicle out for a period of time. And once I've determined maybe we've hit a certain number of hours or miles or a certain amount of time for that rental item, I can then remove it from my rental fleet back to my sales fleet to then sell as potentially a used unit to a customer. So going back to is the rental business profitable? Well, here's a way that you can generate revenue for units that live in your sales inventory and then ultimately sell that as a used unit later on down the road. So it seems like a win-win to me. But as we're looking at this screen, from this screen, you can see there's the stock number information as it relates to the sales unit that lives in my sales inventory. And I can actually click on the stock number and it's going to take me to the sales side of the house that allows me to view the unit inventory item. Now, when it comes to sales unit inventory item or items, one of the things to consider is that once it's marked as a rental item, it's no longer available to sell as long as it's marked as a rental. So the idea behind that is, yes, it's still part of your sales fleet. Yes, it shows up on your flooring statements and is part of your sales inventory. But if I'm a salesperson on the sales side of the business, I can't sell it to a customer as long as it's marked as rental. But once time comes due for me to actually sell that unit from my rental fleet, all I've got to do is uncheck this box, save, and that unit goes from being a rental item to now an in-inventory item for me to now sell on the sales side of the house. So it makes that communication and that interaction between rental and sales seamless. So in addition to the rental items, whether it's boats, motorhomes, dock slips, campgrounds, your rental charges are things that you can add to the rental experience to further enhance the experience to the customer and also further increase revenue coming into the business. And this is a list of some things to consider as you're going into the rental space. Things like something else to add to the rental item. Things like chips and a case of pop, a ball if you're needing to trailer something and the customer forgot their ball receiver and they need to maybe rent one from you. Hitches, generators, fuel surcharges, cleanup fees, dishes, all of the things that might go along with a reservation that further enhance the experience for the customer, but they're also ways that you can generate more revenue for your company. So it's another win-win function as it relates to the rental module. When it comes to rental charges, some things to think about is charge type. Is it repeating or is it non-repeating? And what that means is, based on the reservation intervals, if we're billing that reservation on a weekly, monthly, seasonal, or annual basis, every time we bill for it, and we'll get to rental billing in a moment, does that rental charge get repeated on the reservation? In essence, does it get charged again and again and again through the billing cycle, or is it a one-time charge? So it could be a repeating revenue source during the reservation process. A lot of cool things to think about in the rental space. So let's talk about the reservation itself. When it comes to reservations, what does a reservation look like and how do I interact with it? And how does my customer interact with me through the reservation process? So we're going to go through that together and kind of get a sense of what the reservations look like in the Lightspeed world. If I click on my reservation list in Lightspeed, so rental and reservations, it's going to take me to a defaulted list of future and active reservations that live in my rental department. Well, what's the difference between future and active? Well, let's imagine that you have a customer that calls on a Wednesday afternoon and says, I'm looking to rent a boat for me and my family. I want to pick it up on Saturday and we're going to spend the week on it next week. Well, as a rental clerk, I can create that reservation today on Wednesday, but it doesn't start until Saturday, in which case it's listed as a future reservation. So I've created the reservation, but it's going to start sometime in the future. Whereas an active reservation indicates that that reservation is currently active. It's currently been started and the customer is using that rental item at the very moment. So I get a sense of what both of those look like. And then also from this list, I can look at anything that's been closed or canceled as well. So I can see historical documents within my reservation list, as well as things in the future and things that are currently active. If I were to double click on any one of these reservations, it takes me into my reservation view, which this is an example of a reservation in Lightspeed. And if you've had some experience using Lightspeed before, you'll notice some similarities between the sales and parts and the service departments within the modules. Some of the similarities is customers are always on the upper left side of the screen, whether we're talking parts, service, sales, or rental. So there's a little bit of familiarity in where the layout of things live. The center of the screen contains the rental item. And you can have as many rental items on a single reservation as you want to. If I'm renting out golf carts, for example, maybe I'm a golf course and I'm going to rent 50 golf carts from your company for the weekend because we've got a golf tour coming through. So I could potentially have 50 units on a single reservation if I want to. In this particular example, we've got a customer on the upper left side of the screen, and I've got a single reservation item or a single rental item, which is a motorhome in my particular reservation. On the bottom left of the screen, this is where all of the calculations start to happen. Based on the start and end time frames, when the customer calls ahead of time and says, I want to pick it up on this date and I anticipate that it's going to end on this date, we can populate a start and an end date, which then, based on the rental item, based on the way it's set up to be billed, whether it's daily, hourly, seasonal, monthly, it starts to calculate a period of time based on the time frame on the reservation and then the rate. In this case, the daily rental rate for this particular item is $775 a day. We've got a little bit less than 6 full days in this period, and so it's going to calculate based on that period times rate. It's going to give me my total at the bottom of the reservation. When I'm ready to start the reservation, you've got a couple of buttons on the upper left side of the screen, start and stop. When I'm ready to start the reservation, I click the traffic light that says start, and the calculations start happening immediately. Now, it's possible that based on the rental item, I may require a security deposit up front. So as soon as I hit the start button, it's possible that a cashier screen comes up and allows me to collect for that security deposit right away, or any additional upfront charges that need to come through the reservation process. A full list of all of the charges can be found on the invoice history. This particular reservation is started, and at the beginning of the start, there was a $250 security deposit that was collected, in addition to a $250 rental payment that was also incurred and paid at the beginning of the reservation. At the bottom of the screen, I can see what's been billed to the reservation, what the future charges look like based on what we know of the reservation in terms of time frame so far. And then we've got our reservation total on the bottom right side of the screen. A couple of other things to think about are the attachments tab. So what I always recommend when it comes to reservations is get pictures of the vehicle or the storage location before the rental starts, so we can see what the condition of the item was at the beginning and then take pictures at the end. And we'll look at the mobile application in just a moment to see how convenient the mobile application makes capturing pictures. So we can see we've got left, right, maybe front, back, internal, external of the motorhome before it left, so we know what it looked like before it left. And when it comes back, we might take those same pictures again so that we can see if there's any incurred damage, which then might fall into the rental charges space. So if there's damage that's incurred during the process, we may charge for damage. So I may click add charge and select from my pre-built series of charges, damage, repairs, cleanings, any of the things that we've got set up as charges, I can select from my menu and then apply it to my charge list. In this particular reservation, we've got a case of pop, some chips, some dishes, an awning, and an AC unit that's been charged to this reservation from my library of charges. But going back to attachments, I'd also recommend getting a picture of the customer's driver's license. That's a good idea. You may be doing that in other spaces in Lightspeed, but capture a picture of that driver's license and you can store that on the attachments tab as well. So that's just kind of a quick run through on the reservation itself. One other thing to think about when it comes to reservations and communication. Now, communications become a bigger and bigger part of the Lightspeed world as we've moved more and more into mobile spaces and using the cell phone app within Lightspeed. Just as within the service and sales modules in Lightspeed, we have a communication tab within the rental space that allows you to schedule things like follow-up calls. For example, we've got a follow-up call tomorrow at 1 o'clock to just check in with the customer to verify they're satisfied that everything's working well for them. And then previously, we may have sent out text messages and emails letting the customer know where the keys are and some things to think about with their motorhome as they're taking delivery of the rental item. So just some things to think about. And as we text and email the customer from within Lightspeed, that back and forth communication, the emails and texts that we sent out of the reservation are captured on the communication tab within the reservation, and any replies also come back within that communication panel. Moving into the mobile app. So how does the mobile application fall into this process? Let's take a look at that together now and see why you might be using the mobile application during your reservation process to further increase the satisfaction of the customer and also just increase efficiency for the Lightspeed user. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up an image of the mobile app on the screen now. And you'll notice at the bottom of the latest version of the mobile app is a reservations button. When I click the reservations button, it takes me into the list of all of the open reservations that live in the Lightspeed world. It's kind of a scaled down version of the list we just looked at together on the desktop version. I can click on any one of the open reservations in the mobile application, and I can do things like capture those pictures. Going back to, we want to capture what the vehicle or the location looked like before and after the reservation started and stopped. We can do that very easily from the mobile app. Any pictures I take from the mobile app are stored in the reservation that I've shot those pictures from. I can also click on the follow-ups button, and I can see when the next follow-up is scheduled and the follow-ups that I've completed, things like outbound phone calls that I'm scheduled to do, appointments, walkarounds, deliveries, text, and emails. I can see all of those things as it relates to that customer experience inside that reservation. The other thing I can do from the reservation is if I'm out on the marina, if I'm out on the lot, if I'm in the storage facility with the customer and I need to capture a signature, an authorization for reservation, a walk around, a rental agreement form, anything that I need to capture an electronic signature from the customer from, I can click New, open up that document. I'm going to pull the same list of forms into the mobile app that live on the desktop, and I'm going to be able to send that directly to the customer's cell phone, where they're going to receive either a text or email. They click on the hyperlink. It takes them to a safe, secure location on a browser, or if they agree and accept to terms, they can review the document that I've just sent them, click on the signature line, and sign with their finger right there on the lot, right there on the marina. Wherever I am, I can get an authorization signature and start that process, and I don't have to be at the rental desk to conduct business with my rental customer. They also have an opportunity to download a copy of that e-signed document directly to their phone or to their email if they want to, but I'm going to probably print off a copy from the desktop version at some point in the future. We'll have that option for them as well. But really the idea is from the mobile space, I can conduct much of the business that I need to conduct and create a seamless experience for the customer in my rental business. So a couple other things to think about. We talked about rental billing cycles. Some of the rentals are based on hourly rates, daily rates, in which case rental billing doesn't really come into play. But if we're talking about longer term reservations where folks are renting a slip or a storage location or a campground for an extended period of time. It's possible that over that period of time, we need to incur billing charges to that reservation so that we can continue to update the charges that apply to that reservation and the current balance due to the customer, and ultimately create a way for the customer to make payments either to a receivable account or to a credit card on file if we're using our integrated WorldPay credit card processing, or just allow us to generate a statement from the rental module to bill the customer directly from the rental module. So kind of going back into billing. If we're using the billing function for our longer term reservations, our campgrounds, our storage facilities, we can calculate the charges based on the timeframes of those reservations and then click apply charges. And any charges, any values that are incurred during that reservation period get applied to the reservation, ultimately updating the balance due on the reservation automatically. So I don't have to go one by one and update those reservations. This does it on the whole for me for all the open reservations. And then ultimately from there, I can look at things like my aging report. So under rental reports and rental aging, if I want to see what are the balances due to all of the open reservations, how old are they? What are the details associated to it in terms of invoicing and billing? I can go into my rental aging report and review all the open reservations, the balances due, the charges, invoices, late charges, and fees that have been applied to those reservations in real time. And anytime I hit report, I get a real-time updated snapshot of what's going on in my rental business right then. I can also send out rental statements from the rental module. So if I'm bypassing the need for credit card on file, or if I'm bypassing the need for receivable accounting, I can send out statements directly from the rental module, and I can send them by email or print and send by post. And it's going to show the customer a breakdown of what their rental experience looks like, what the rental item is, what the time frame looks like, any charges that have been incurred, and what the amount due is to the customer. Also, I've got the e-signature functionality. If I need to capture an e-signature from the customer at any time during the rental statement process, I can also get an electronic signature from my customer as well. All those things considered, when it comes to rental, as we saw at the top of the screen, rental is its own department. And the way Lightspeed looks at it, it looks at it as its own unique profit center. Just as though it looks at parts, service, and sales as their own unique profit center, it sees rental in the same way. So when it comes to things like your transaction report, your profit and loss statement, your balance sheet, all of those are going to have a department for rental. And this is a little bit of a taste of what that would look like. So as we're looking at the transaction report in a summary fashion, you can see the rental department is its own profit center with its own revenue, its own taxes collected, deposits collected, and rental revenue and deferred revenue values as it relates to that specific department. Now on the consolidated statements, if we're talking financial reporting, it's part of the consolidated statement, but it also gives you an idea of what it's doing in terms of performance on its own, which is a powerful function within Lightspeed. So that takes us to kind of the end of our walkthrough of the rental module. We hope that we were able to convey some value in the rental space and give you some things to think about. Does anybody have any questions or comments at this point?
Yep, great stuff, Brian. Thank you so much for that excellent overview of Lightspeed Rental. Very fun. And there's some questions that have come in. I'll give you a minute to look at some of those too. But one question that I think I can just address right away is somebody wanted to know what's the difference between a deposit and a security deposit on a rental, if people are tracking those as different line items.
Good question. So a security deposit is something that's incurred as soon as I start the reservation. The reservation is going to charge that amount up front. So it's something that we predetermined during our setup of the rental module that we're going to collect a security deposit for these types of reservations regardless of circumstances. Where a deposit might be, a customer is going to, let's say the customer wants to pay half of it up front. This is something they're agreeing to do. Maybe they want to get a portion of the rental payment done at the beginning and then pay the rest at the end. It's something they kind of agree to based on the individual circumstances. But security deposits are a requirement. Deposits are based on circumstances. I guess I would say it that way.
Great. That makes a ton of sense. Have you had a chance, Brian, to look at any of the other questions that are out there? I can pick a couple other ones too, if you'd like.
Yeah, I sure haven't had a chance.
Okay. This is one too, I think is kind of interesting one too. People are wondering, like with meter readings, when you're checking out a vehicle, like how do you record a meter reading in a rental item?
Good question. So depending on the rental item, you may have a meter setting attached to it, in which case, as you're setting up your rental types, let's say motorhome or motorcycle, you can assign a meter reading to those types, in which case, when on the reservation, when a rental item is coming back, there's a screen in which where you can put the start mileage and end mileage, or hours start, hours ending, and it might incur a charge, but it's just a way that you can manage the rental fleet based on those definitions.
Perfect, perfect. I know we've got quite a few questions here, and I know we won't get to all of them today, but I just want to assure everybody we will follow up with the Q&A as a document, and also the recording and the PowerPoint presentation. We'll have all of that available really by early tomorrow morning, if not even later today. Maybe there's one more question we can do too. People are just wondering if it's possible to invoice a customer prior to starting the reservation.
It is. It's possible to collect a deposit. You can also, if you're charging for pop and drinks and things like that, it's certainly possible to generate an invoice attached to a reservation before the start.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And I said, unfortunately, I don't think we'll get to everything else. I said, appreciate Brian and great presentation. Appreciate all the attendees, really engagement and the great questions. We will get to those. If you want to just go to the next slide, Brian, just one quick reminder too, we will have our next Wednesday webinar coming up on Wednesday, March 15th. And this topic will be the real-time accounting within Lightspeed. So certainly something we get a lot of questions about. So we're hoping to see many of you there again. And again, appreciate everybody's time today. And we want to just wish all of you a wonderful Wednesday. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.